Geordie Journos back outside the Newcastle United Media Centre. Dom Skir flying solo today. It's Good Friday. Jordan Cronin's out enjoying his Easter weekend. I'm hoping you guys are too, but if you've spared a moment to watch this video, good on you, because we're going to discuss Jason Tindall's pre-match press conference ahead of Newcastle United's match against Aston Villa. Newcastle obviously in great form, 6 wins in a row heading into this game. Villa though, obviously a tricky opponent in themselves. They beat PSG in midweek, although they got knocked out, but great form at Villa Park. They've only lost 2 games there all season, one in the Carabao Cup against Crystal Palace. The last Premier League defeat at Villa Park came all the way back in August against Arsenal, so always a tough task. But we were saying that last season, and Newcastle went and won 3-1, so funny how things can work out. But yeah, Newcastle, this is probably their toughest test since the Carabao Cup final, you'd argue, in terms of the opposition they're playing. The 5 points ahead of Villa in the table I think this is the game that will decide whether Newcastle United get Champions League football. I think if they win, that's pretty much it, sealed off. A draw, you'd still fancy them. A defeat, then it's still up in the air, I'd say, a little bit, where Villa move 2 points behind you. 5 games left to play, anything can happen. So yeah, a really important game in that respect, and it was good to see and good to hear Jason Tindall's thoughts ahead of it. So what did the Newcastle assistant have to say? We'll start on an update, or lack of an update, on Eddie Howe, because this is the last game that it's officially been announced that Jason Tindall would be taking charge of, but the Newcastle assistant said no update on Eddie Howe. Still, get well soon, Eddie Howe. Hopefully we'll see him back in the dugout before the end of the season, though what's being made clear, there's no guarantees on that. So Jason Tindall in the dugout, it's interesting how things work. He will be in charge for Newcastle's match against Aston Villa, and if you remember, the last time Newcastle faced Aston Villa, Jason Tindall was embroiled in a bit of controversy. He was sent off for a clash in the tunnel at half-time, where Eddie Howe had to sort of act as the mediator. He came between Unai Emery, Victor Manas, the Villa analyst, and Jason Tindall, who were clashing in the tunnel. Tindall was sent off, Manas was sent off, and the duo was subject to an FA investigation, which saw the Villa analyst banned for 2 games, I believe it was. Jason Tindall cleared of all charges, so interesting how that worked out. And I think you read the FA report, Jason Tindall, Villa seemed aggrieved that he came out wearing a Wham hoodie at full time to celebrate the win. And Tindall today actually added a bit more context to that. He was speaking about how that was something he said he would do if Newcastle won the game. It wasn't a premeditated, it was a premeditated thing. It wasn't a sort of dig into the heels and laying it into Villa just because of what happened at half-time. That was something he was always going to do if Newcastle indeed won the game, which they did 3-0. Obviously, John Duran got sent off in that game, and Newcastle ended up strolling to quite a comfortable victory on Boxing Day. I'd like to think Newcastle have got better since then. Villa will feel they've got better since then. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. And obviously Jason Tindall clashed with Unai Emery in that game. And he was asked whether he would shake hands with Unai Emery. And Tindall said he'll certainly offer his hand. And if he wants to shake at Unai Emery, then he's sure he will. So hopefully no ill feelings and anything like that heading into the game at Villa Park. But it's going to be an interesting one, and obviously Newcastle gone unchanged the last 6 games. They've won the last 6 games and seem to be getting better and better by each game. I mean, a funny stat works out. They've scored 1 goal in the win against West Ham, then 2 goals win against Brentford, 3 goals against Leicester, 4 goals against Manchester United, and then 5 against Crystal Palace, as we touched on in our last video. Good stat. Credit to Liam Kennedy for pointing that out, but I'm carrying that on because, yeah, is it going to be 6 against Villa? I personally doubt it. I think it'll be a really tough test. It's probably one of those where, given the run of form and given the league table and the limited number of games left, you'd possibly take a draw. Although, has your mentality changed where you're going, look, we can beat anyone at the moment? But I'd personally take a draw. Whether that's been negative or not, I'm not sure. I just see that keep Villa at bay, and Newcastle are still in a very healthy position with 5 games left to play, including game against Ipswich at St James's Park, Chelsea to play at St James's Park, which is another game that potentially could have a big say on the Champions League qualification places. But it's going to be a big game, an interesting game. I'd expect Newcastle to go unchanged again. Jason Tindall was asked about someone like Anthony Gordon, where he's breathing down the neck, looking to get back in the starting lineup, but former Jacob Murphy, the former Harvey Barnes in particular, keeping him out the team, and who's to argue? And the message from Jason Tindall was, look, if Anthony Gordon was in that position, he'd want the likes of Harvey Barnes, the likes of Jacob Murphy, particularly Harvey Barnes, to support him and help him carry on that good form. It's a team game at the end of the day, but then when that chance does arise, Anthony Gordon's come off the bench the last 2 games, he has to be ready to take it. And Anthony Gordon, he's been out for a while, he hasn't started a game since he was sent off against Brighton, and he has been injured in that time, so he'll need to get back up to full speed. We've seen the last 2 games, he's probably been almost trying too hard to really make an impact once the game's already won as well, in effect. So be interesting to see how many minutes, if indeed he does get minutes on Saturday at Villa Park, Anthony Gordon gets, or whether the likes of Jacob Murphy and Harvey Barnes continue the good run of form. Because you go back a few weeks ago, there was talk of, it was put to Eddie Howe even, on Newcastle United, a one-man team with Alexander Isak scoring, I think, 40% of the Premier League goals this season. But since then, since Eddie Howe completely refuted that claim and said far more than just a one-man team, far more than just relying on Alexander Isak, that's proven to be the case. Newcastle are far more than just that, and you're seeing the likes of Harvey Barnes, the likes of Jacob Murphy, Sandro Tonali even contributing with goals, assists. Joe Linton's got 2 assists his last 2 games. Bruno contributed with a goal against Manchester United. Then you're seeing Dan Burn pop up in the Carabao Cup final, Fabian Schär pop up with a goal the other night. We've really seen Newcastle show that the goals from all over the pitch, not just Alexander Isak in recent weeks. So hopefully Alexander Isak can rediscover his fully firing form that we've seen him score 25 goals this season. But you'd argue since the sort of Carabao Cup final, really, after the international break, he has not quite hit the levels he was at previously, although he's still scoring goals to a degree. He went 2 games without a goal. He's not gone 3 games without a goal since October. So, yeah, back amongst the goals. It was a very well taken goal the other night against Crystal Palace. But before that, he probably will feel coming off the pitch he could have got a hat-trick, because Dean Henderson made a few really good saves in that game. But yeah, speaking on someone like Harvey Barnes, a player I've asked Eddie Howe about, and he said he's forming such a good relationship with Tino Livramento down that left-hand side, and it's almost a makeshift left-hand side in some ways. Harvey Barnes in his natural position, but Tino Livramento's had to move over. So that was part of a question asked Jason Tindall today, where you're seeing Tino Livramento as a left-back. Is it his best position? I'd argue he's a better left-back, or more effective left-back, than he is a right-back. And then you're seeing Kieran Trippier come in the side and be so effective at right-back with a run of games in the side. I think he's been perfect since his return to the side, when there were previously question marks over him. But Tino Livramento at left back, I put it to Jason Tindall, what do you make of his form? And he said, you go on recent form, he's arguably one of the best performing left backs in the Premier League, and it's hard to disagree. The energy he brings in, okay, the lack of, I guess, natural quality to deliver on your left foot that we saw against West Ham, I think he's almost taken that out of his game, and we're seeing a player who can create and can give chances to Newcastle from that left-hand side, just with his pace and his drive and his technical quality. We saw against Manchester United the other night, and yeah, Tino Livramento has found a new lease of life on that left-hand side. And Jason Tindall, he probably disputed what I said slightly, where I think Tino Livramento's playing his best football in black and white at the moment. He said, well, Tino's been a consistent performer all season, which I'd somewhat disagree with, really. I think earlier in the season at right back, he was struggling for form, struggling for consistency. He'd have the odd good game, but then a couple of poorer games, I'd say. You go back to the Palace game back in November, where it was a tough game for him that day, and then you saw Palace the other night on the left-hand side. He was brilliant. So, yeah, you're looking at Tino Livramento, then Harvey Barnes comes into that equation, Sandro Tonali, even Lewis Hall, who Tino Livramento's replaced. These are 4 players signed in the summer of 2023. These are players signed for a lot of money. You're looking at 55 million for Sandro Tonali, 38 for Harvey Barnes, around 35 for Tino Livramento and 28 for Lewis Hall. That's a significant sum of money in a PSR world, and last season ultimately they never had the desired impact. You're looking at Tino Livramento, who had a bit part role, probably being your best signing of last season. But Eddie Howe did say at the time, and credit to Eddie Howe for this, said the signings for the future as well as the now. And although they had limited impact last season, Sandro Tonali's impact probably taken out of the club's hands in a lot of ways. These are 4 players who this season in particular, I look at Tonali, is there a better number 6 in the Premier League or even in Europe, dare you say, at the moment? You look at him every game since he came into the side, certainly since the turn of the year, he has been absolutely magnificent. And is he Newcastle's most important player at the moment? That's something we've discussed previously on the Geordie Journos, and he's certainly making a case for it, because you saw the other night that pass for Harvey Barnes to release him, but then the way he just never gives a Palace player a moment's rest. He's everywhere. His energy levels are incredible, and he's the player you always hoped he'd be at Newcastle. We saw glimpses of that on his debut against Aston Villa, who Newcastle of course play tomorrow, but then it never quite materialised, and then he had his ban. And Jason Tindall said, look, Sandro Tonali came into a side that played completely different to AC Milan, so those 10 months out, in a lot of ways, as difficult as they were, probably helped Sandro Tonali, and now he's come back, as cliched as it is, like a new signing. Lewis Hall's another one who limited impact last season. This season, been like a new signing, of course, now injured, but first half of the season, arguably Newcastle's most consistent performer. Tino Livramento, really well. Harvey Barnes, we've had to wait a little longer, but he's got 9 goals this season. He's been really quite effective in front of goal, and he's enjoying, like Tino Livramento, probably his best run of form in the Newcastle side at the moment. So yeah, that transfer window, which you can go back to our previous videos, we're probably looking, Newcastle may have needed signings for the here and now. When you're spending the best part of £140 million on 4 players, you want them to have a real impact on the pitch. It never quite materialised last season, and perhaps some of the reason why Newcastle finished 7th, missed out on Europe, but this season really reaped the rewards of it. Key reason why Newcastle are sitting 3rd in the table, looking to qualify for the Champions League and have a cup. So yeah, it's been brilliant, and what was possibly seen as a disappointing transfer window back then is now looking like an incredible transfer window now. So Jason Tindall recognised that. He said, look, players have had to be patient. He even pointed to someone like Will Asula, who me and Jordan discussed in our previous video, is someone who there's certainly question marks over. Will he have a place in the side? Could he go out on loan? I still think he possibly does need a loan move, but Jason Tindall said just before, these are players, he'll be a great player for Newcastle United. Lewis Miley's another one. Okay, he's not a signing, but a player who's come into the side in the last 12 to 18 months and shown a lot of promise. We'll probably need to see more from Lewis Miley as well, get on the pitch a little bit more, make an impact in games, but he is still only 18. He's 19 in a few weeks' time, but still a player who has a bright future ahead of him at Newcastle United. And you look at Lewis Hall, he's just turned 20, Tino Livramento, 21, 22. These are players who you're looking at the future really bright. Sandro Tonali as well, only 24, he's 25 very soon, but this is a player who the best years are still yet to come, and that is really, really exciting. Harvey Barnes still only 27, he's probably hitting his peak, you'd like to think, at the moment, but we're seeing that on the pitch and reaping the rewards for that. So it's great to see at the moment, and there's a feeling that this Newcastle side can only get better, even if they don't bullseye in the summer, which we indeed hope they will. And the belief is there is money there to strengthen in the summer, though that will be dependent on Champions League qualification or what European competition Newcastle are playing in. Champions League, obviously the massive money benefits from that. You saw Aston Villa reaching the quarter-final. It's made them the best part of £100 million. The new format is really beneficial. The more games you have to play and increased revenue to come from that. So qualifying for the Champions League for Newcastle, really important financially, but also be able to keep key players, also sign key players as well in the summer. So that's why these final 6 games of the season, and particularly Saturday's game against Aston Villa, so important. But on that note, we'll have a quick word from our sponsors before getting into some of your questions you asked me ahead of the press conference. So here are our sponsors. Comply IT Limited. Worrying about disposing of your old IT equipment? Don't be. Comply IT handle everything. Secure collection, detailed tracking, and certified data destruction. That's Comply IT Limited. We've also got Mitigate. Mitigate enhances workplace mental health, helping businesses stay compliant, reduce absences, and unlock higher productivity, creating healthier, happier teams. And of course, our OG sponsors, Four Rivers Financial Planning. Four Rivers Financial Planning offer holistic financial advice for all stages of life, ensuring your plan remains robust and adaptable in the ever-changing world we live in. So yeah, those are our three sponsors, links in the description below. And please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe for all your latest Geordie Journos content. I'll of course be reunited, thankfully, on Saturday with Jordan Cronin and Liam Kennedy at Villa Park, where we're hopefully discussing another Newcastle United win. But yeah, before the press conference today, I obviously tweeted it out that I was here and asked whether you guys had any questions for me that you wanted me to address in a video, because I wasn't sure what there would be to talk about. Thankfully, there was plenty, but some of you guys asked a question. One of you guys actually prompted me to ask Jason Tindall a question, so thank you. So yeah, it was Geordie Tune for Life asked, "Morning Dom, do we have a timescale for when or if Sven Botman will return to the squad?" Asked Jason Tindall that. He obviously said the other day to my question about Sven Botman, he was very close to a return. He's ahead of schedule. The sort of initial time frame would see Sven Botman return at the start of May. You're looking at that Brighton game on the 4th of May as a potential return date. But I said, well, could we see Sven Botman this weekend or could it be next weekend? Jason Tindall said no to this weekend. He said maybe to next weekend. So it's not the fully clear Sven Botman update you were maybe hoping for, but he's back on the grass. He's back training in some part with the first team, which are positive signs, still ahead of schedule. So that would suggest he has a chance of being in contention for Ipswich. But as you always say on Sven Botman, knee injuries, he's been very close to a return on a number of occasions and then just had his return delayed. So take that with a pinch of salt. But based on the words coming out of Jason Tindall's mouth at least, and the words you're hearing from the training ground, it's all looking positives with Sven Botman. But you'd argue, even when he is fit, does he get back in the team? Because Fabian Schär, Dan Burn playing very well at the moment. And yeah, but Sven Botman, sooner he's back, the better. The other option Newcastle have, because yeah, Dan Burn or Fabian Schär injury away from a bit of a defensive disaster, because Jamal Lascelles is still recovering from an ACL injury, and then Lloyd Kelly's out on loan. There's a lack of real seniority in the centre-back positions. You may have to ask someone like Emil Kraft to come in and fill in at centre-back if indeed anyone gets injured, which hopefully they won't, and hopefully we'll see Sven Botman back very soon. In terms of your other questions, Ben McDermott went in on the transfers and asked, is the James Trafford deal, the Burnley goalkeeper, is that as far along as has been claimed? And yeah, it's an interesting one, James Trafford, because Newcastle tried to sign him from Burnley last summer. Burnley, it was a bid of £16 million rejected by Burnley, but personal terms not an issue. They're understood to be verbally agreed. So that's sort of the nature of why the James Trafford deal is being reported to be potentially further along than it is in what you're saying, Ben, because James Trafford, if Newcastle can agree a deal with Burnley, which is a big if, and that's not something that just needs box tick, that's a negotiation that needs to take place this summer. If that happens, James Trafford will be a Newcastle player because personal terms not an issue. They were effectively agreed last summer. The only thing is, James Trafford, since last summer, has had an incredible season in the Championship. I mean, the amount of clean sheets he's had, almost 30 clean sheets in 40 appearances, it's ridiculous numbers. So, yeah, his valuation will have increased more than the 16 million Newcastle bid, the 20 million Burnley may have been looking for. You're looking closer to 30 million now, which for a goalkeeper who is still unproven at Premier League level, as good as a season as he's had in the Championship, it's a lot of money. But the money, as I say, is potentially there. So we'll wait and see with James Trafford. It's not on the verge of happening, as you've suggested, Ben. Like, you can understand it's still a lot of work to do there. But if Newcastle can reach an agreement with Burnley, I think that's something that can certainly happen this summer, because James Trafford, it's a position Newcastle are looking to strengthen. As many goalkeepers as they have, I think the goalkeeper position is something they'll look to strengthen. And Nick Pope has returned to the side with fairly decent run of form eventually after that initial rustiness, which Eddie Howe recognised, Nick Pope recognised himself, but is now playing well. He conceded a penalty the other night, but stood up tall well to save it and keep a clean sheet as well. So yeah, that's the situation as far as I understand it in terms of the goalkeeper situation. Do I expect James Trafford to be a Newcastle goalkeeper next season? I think it's the most realistic signing we can expect at this stage. It's still a long way to go before the summer, but I think if there's one signing I'd put my hat on happening, I think James Trafford is certainly the most realistic one, or the one that's standing out the most at the moment. But like I say, a lot can happen between now and when the transfer window opens, and indeed once the transfer window opens. So yeah, I'll just cover my own back there. But yeah, James Trafford certainly wouldn't surprise me if he's a Newcastle player. Another question from Ben was, Callum Wilson, new contract, will that happen? Well, we've seen from Callum Wilson, and it links into another question I was asked about Callum Wilson, which was slightly less kind. It was just in nicer words, is how I'm putting it, was what's his role in the side at the moment. And we've seen it. He's coming off the bench. He's helping Alexander Isak manage his minutes. You want to see more from Callum Wilson. We know his quality. We know his ceiling. At Newcastle, he is a goal scorer, but we haven't seen it in the Premier League this season. His one goal this season coming in the FA Cup, a tap-in. He had a good game, to be fair, against Birmingham City, but that's League One opposition. In terms of the Premier League, we haven't really seen Callum Wilson shine this season, but has had a real lack of football. But out of contract in the summer, Newcastle do have a extension option potentially, and there's been talk, will he be offered a new deal? I think it's an interesting one because Callum Wilson is a player very much liked by Eddie Howe, liked by Jason Tindall. I think if Eddie Howe had his way and Callum Wilson could prove his fitness between now and the end of the season, yeah, absolute no-brainer. Callum Wilson will be offered a new deal. But if you're looking at it in PSR terms, Callum Wilson's a high earner. Can you get him to agree to a potential reduced salary because of his smaller role he'll have to play, where he's very much second choice to Alexander Isak in the side, whereas previously it was almost a bit of to and fro in fighting for that position. Certainly Alexander Isak's first season, where it was like Callum Wilson managed to keep Alexander Isak out this side, but then injuries have seen Alexander Isak sort of take that opportunity with both hands. So new contract for Callum Wilson would not surprise me, to be fair, but as I stand here now, I'm not entirely sure whether Newcastle will entertain it. I think it again depends on European competition. Callum Wilson's obviously a homegrown player. He's a player who, if fit, will be a good rotation option to use when the games are coming thick and fast, particularly at the start of the season where you've got 8 games in Europe plus the Carabao Cup, and then the FA Cup comes into it in January, but then busy schedule in the Premier League as well. You'll need all the quality you can get. I think it depends on what Newcastle can get in the summer. They'll be looking to strengthen in attacking areas in the summer, but they'll have to sign someone who's willing to play a second string role to Alexander Isak. Callum Wilson at 33 years old, his injury record, he can't play games week in, week out anymore. He's probably, I'd say probably, willing to almost play a backseat role in some regard to Alexander Isak for a club competing at the top end of the Premier League, though he may look at it and go, I don't know, there's a Coventry potentially coming in the Premier League, you never know. The team's coming up, or a team lower down the league, he could be playing regular football at that level and scoring goals. So it's up to what the player wants. I think Newcastle, realistically, even if they got Callum Wilson on a new deal, in terms of a transfer fee they could demand, how high is that going to be for a player who's been injury prone, who's 34 next season? It's not a lot of money. It wouldn't make a PSR sense as such at the moment. So yeah, that's sort of the situation with Callum Wilson. Again, up in the air as such. Newcastle, they do have potential options to extend Callum Wilson's stay. Whether he indeed agrees to that is something else, but we'll wait and see on that one. But that pretty much sums up the press conference this morning. I've been Dom Skir, flying solo. Please let me know, like I say, predictions for the Villa game tomorrow. I'm going to go, this is completely daring, and I say that without a hint of sarcasm, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, which sounds like the safest prediction possible. But you remember, if you go back at the fixtures, Newcastle actually haven't drawn a game since early December. You go back 24 games since their last draw. So I'll say a 1-1 draw, and I'd take a 1-1 draw as well. Call me negative, but certainly keeps Newcastle on the front foot in the Champions League race and doesn't stifle the momentum too much. So yeah, I'll be back, like I say, with Jordan, with Liam, on Saturday evening at Villa Park, where we're hopefully talking about a Newcastle win. And if you want to see that video, please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and it'll be dropped straight into your notifications. And yeah, there'll obviously be Liam's live as well. And check that out, and we'll see you at Villa Park. And thanks for watching. Cheers.